So the next period of time we want to talk about is what we might call Roman Britain. And as you can see from this image here, the Romans then come and invade Britain, Britannicus, they called it, in around about sort of the start of what we might call AD or CE. 43 AD is usually seen as the date the Romans conquered Britain. We know that Julius Caesar came a little bit before that, but we're talking sort of around the year zero is about when this all kicks off. Now, when we talk about Roman Britain then, ethnically, the Roman Empire was an absolutely massive empire, as you can see from this image, that spread really all across Europe, down into Africa, into Asia and the Middle East. As I say, a lot of mainland Europe and up into Britannia, as the Romans would have called it. And the Romans would have battled a lot with the Celts in Europe, and Celts obviously in Britain, Britannia as well. So we have people ethnically coming to Britain from all over what you might call the known world, all over the Roman Empire, people coming to settle in Britain and live in Britain and to rule over Britain as well, and to tell the Britons, the Celts, how to live their lives. Leadership-wise, Romans conquered Britain and became their rulers. Clans could still be led by their chiefs, but they had to follow Roman law and would have to have listened to the Roman leaders and done really what the Roman leaders would have told them. Lots of rebellions by the clans that didn't want to be ruled by the leaders. We know about the very famous story of Boudica, but there was many hundreds of different British clans rising up, not wanting to be ruled by the Romans and fighting the Romans. None were overly successful. The Romans had a bit of difficulty with the Scots in, well, Scotland, and eventually built Hadrian's Wall, if you've ever heard of that. But usually the Roman army was successful in battle. They would usually replace people more willing to follow Roman law if the rebellion was defeated. And for the first time, kind of most of Britain is ruled by one group. Until this point, we talked about how in the Stone Age period, groups would have really kind of just managed themselves. There wouldn't really have been much in that way. Iron Age, Bronze Age, Celts would have kind of been managing themselves, their clans, but for the first time, Britain, and particularly England, is ruled sort of by one leadership structure, the Romans. They built new towns, they replaced ones that had been built before, often larger, much more organized. The Romans were kind of known for a lot of structure and building things in a very logical and ordered way. Straight roads and more proper roads as well, what you might call proper roads, using stone and brick to build hard roads that wagons and things could travel much more easily over. Celts would have had to pay tax to the Romans for using these roads and these towns. Wealthy people might have lived in sort of what you might call Roman style villas, houses, and maybe even had their children educated by teachers as well. But again, that would have been the more wealthy people who would have been able to afford that. The poorer people would have still had to continue to farm and sort of struggle to survive in a way. Lots of people still farmers, as we said. New opportunities arose to join the Roman army and become what was called a citizen. So to be a citizen of Rome meant that you had different rights, you had more opportunities than someone who wasn't a citizen of Rome. Even if you lived in the Roman lands in Britain, that didn't necessarily mean you were a citizen. New connections to Roman Empire mean that trading became more popular. Merchants and craftsmen could sell their products to many more people. So there were positives to the Roman Empire coming and taking over too. Romans introduced lots of kind of cultural things we know of today. Theatre, poetry, and even democracy, voting for who you want to be in charge. Although, keep in mind, the Romans' version of democracy was very different to kind of our version of democracy. For example, only citizens got to vote. Not everyone got to pick to vote. They had more advanced technology, bath houses, plumbing into the most wealthy places as well, bringing that sort of technology into Britain as well. Religiously then, so most of the Celts who lived in Britain kind of stayed as Druids, but the Romans then also had their own religion that they brought that lots of Britons converted to. Also, the Romans were the very first people to bring Christianity to the island, although it was not really particularly well spread. Remember, Jesus had only died a few hundred years ago. So Jesus died in 33 AD. That's at least the popular believed. The Romans then came in 43 AD, and stayed until 410 AD. So Christianity as a religion was very new at this point. But it would have been introduced. As I said, not many people would have followed it, but it was there. The Romans then, how did they leave Britain? We know that happened around 410 AD. I mean, look, the story of the Romans leaving and why they left is very complex and beyond what you need to know. Civil wars in Rome, if you remember a civil war, that's a war in one nation or one place between different groups in that one place. It meant troops were needed elsewhere. They were taken out of Britain. Lots of Roman soldiers then left Britain. The Celts began to take more and more control. And eventually, without kind of anyone in charge, Britain went back to life more in the Iron Age, small groups of people ruling over themselves, and that then brings in what we kind of call the Anglo-Saxon period. And my next video will kind of talk more about that.